Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to another episode of Soul Over Matter podcast. I'm your host, Michelle, and today we have a special guest, a dear, dear friend and soul sister, Hope, and she is a psychotherapist and psychic medium. Hope, welcome to Soul Over Matter. How are you today?
Hey, Michelle. So happy to be here. I'm so excited.
I feel like it's just going to be a chat. So it's just going to be like, so Hope and I literally always talk like we need to just to record our conversations sometimes. These would be so helpful to people. So I'm so happy you're here and that we're chatting on the podcast and you're sharing your gifts and your wisdom with my audience. So let's start from the beginning. I'm really hearing to ask you, how did you know you were a medium? Like, what were the first experiences that you had as a child that really opened that world to you?
Wow. I feel like there's like two parts to this. It's like a part where I knew as a child, and then there was a part where I knew as an adult. Um, so I remember being the kid with the vivid imagination, and I remember seeing things that nobody else saw and like really feeling in my heart and my soul that they were true and they were real. And I remember one of the first things, and it always replays in my mind. And it's funny because I'll tell my mom the story and she tells it differently than I do. But I remember seeing something that was very much like Fantasia, but I saw it in real life. And I remember seeing spirit as like ghosts or cartoons that were like really friendly and engaging, that weren't scary. And I think that's just the version that they showed up for me at the time, because seeing like real people might have been too jarring and I was like 4, 5, 6 at this time, where I would see it and I would tell my mom and she's like, oh, well, those are your imaginary friends. And I'm like, yeah, but they talk to me and they talk back and like we have conversations, they tell me things about themselves. And I remember we had this closet in the hallway of my apartment, and I would go and play in there because that's where they would show up for me, in the closet. And it was like this huge walk-in closet, or maybe it wasn't that big and I was just very little at the time. But I would sit in the closet and I would talk to them, and my mom would find me there all the time. So I think then I knew something was up, or I would hear things, or like the radio would turn on in the middle of the night and tell me things. And then I would tell my mom, and of course it was like, no, the radio just turned on. You probably heard a radio news program or something like that. I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, I don't even know what that is. So then at 13, I had this like really whimsical math teacher, and this was in like the Bronx in New York. So I don't know how she found me and we found her, but she bought me my first deck of tarot cards after giving me a reading. And I remember in the reading, and I was like very cheeky around 13, she would tell me, she's like, you're gonna have a lot of money, you're gonna have a lot of sex. And I don't know why this lady was telling a 13-year-old that, but she was. And I was like, I'm gonna be a prostitute. Like, it was like my first. I must have learned like what a prostitute was like the week before, and like really felt like very excited about letting her know that I knew what that was too. And so like those were the first two instances in childhood that always stick out. And then funny enough, one of our mutual friends, Maggie, comes to my house to give me an astrological reading, and she takes out a deck of cards, and I'm like, wow, I have not touched my cards in years. And the deck that Claudia, was her name, gave me was the Aleister Crowley deck, the top deck. And I hadn't touched it in years because somebody told me that it was like witchcraft and I was going to go to hell, and I got scared. So I put it away for like 10 years. And then probably on the 10th year, Madge is at my house doing my reading. We're hanging out. And she's like, why don't you just pick them up again? And I'm like, no, like I'm scared. And she was like, well, do you think I'm going to go to hell? I'm like, no. So she's like, well, then why would you? I'm like, okay. And so I picked them up again 3.5 years ago. And then along with picking them up, I started seeing actual people. And they always come in my periphery, and I would see how they dress, and I'd be able to like smell their perfume or their cologne. And I would be able to tell people characteristics of them that like I wouldn't otherwise know. So I feel like once I picked it up and I kind of reclaimed that power, then the power intensified and has continued to intensify. I also feel like every time I have a really hard time in my life, my power levels up too. So
Mm.
I had some stuff going on with my son. And after that, I was able to see them even clearer. Then I had some health stuff going on. And even now, my powers are even stronger. I feel like every time I have something earthly happen that is like in that I or my family are in crisis, then that power starts to level up, probably because I need to use it myself. So that's my long-winded explanation.
I love it. I've never heard it. It's so beautiful. How did you feel when you realized like the connection of being a child, right? And seeing like more cartoon like, right? More like gentle looking spirits to like actual people from, I'm sure, different clothing depending on the period that they came from.
Like I think it really clicked when my daughter tells me she sees things and my son has seen things, and my daughter tells me like there's fairies in her room, or she'll say the angels are in her room. And for me that clicked because I'm like, I'm sure that they're fairies and angels, but for me when I think about it, I'm like, what if these are just souls coming to her um in a very like just palatable way for how little she is. She's only 4. She's been doing this for 2 years, telling me these things. And she describes them in detail to where it's not just a figment of her imagination. So it really clicked for me then that it's like, this is just the way that they show up. And I'm trying so hard to keep that gift alive in her so that when they make the transition for her, it's not scary or jarring. The funny thing for me is like, it never scared me. And I am terrified of everything. Like, I don't like scary movies. I don't like gore. I don't like, even if I'm watching like a thriller, like the other day we were watching Vanilla Sky and I was like, tell me what's going to happen. Tell me. Like, and I know what's going to happen because I'm the one who ruins all the movies. But like, I was like, you have to tell me, like, my anxiety is like peak. But when I see a spirit or somebody's around me, it never feels scary to me. It's just like, oh, hi. Like, what's going on here? It's like meeting somebody at the grocery store. Like, it's so normal and natural for me.
I love that. It's probably more natural for you to talk to them than humans on the earth plane right now.
Yeah, honestly, I'm very awkward, especially like I noticed that about myself last year during school drop off, where I was like, oh God, I got to talk to a bunch of like people now. Like, what do I say? And I was just like, am I saying too much? Am I saying too little? Like, am I being a big weirdo? But like with people who've crossed over, like it's just not like that. They show up, they tell you what you want, you can ask them questions, you get more information. Sometimes they give it to you, sometimes they don't. But it's always like it always feels to me like a super seamless transaction.
Mm. I feel like some people listening are wondering, like, how can you determine the boundaries, right? Like you and I have talked about this off
Oh yeah.
camera, offline, but learning the boundaries of, oh, I'm not an open channel for your liking when I'm in bed at 4 a.m. trying to sleep.
Yeah, I learned it the hard way, as I do most of my lessons. So I think after being woken up or disturbed many times, or after going places and seeing things where I was supposed to be present for like an event or something like that, then through speaking with I mean, you and I have spoken about it so many times, but through speaking with other people, I really realized that, like, one, I was lacking boundaries in my own life, right? In my very human life. And so it makes sense that I'd be lacking boundaries in my spiritual life. And so I had to really learn what a boundary was and what that looked like. And so I think my first go around in learning and experiencing expressing boundaries was really in the spirit world, where I was like, this is like office hours. You can come to my office, you can hang out here, but when I turn the lights off and I walk out, you got to walk out with me. Don't care where you go, but you're not invited here anymore. And I remember seeing spirits in my bedroom and in the hallways, and I was like, this is not the collection zone for souls, right? I need a break too. But I also more recently have translated that into my personal life. Like I use do not disturb and I don't answer every text message. And I'm not doing readings until January right now because I needed a break from all of that energy. So I think the spirit world and being a medium really taught me boundaries that I could implement in my day-to-day life.
Mm, amazing. Yeah. I feel, yeah. And then how do you protect yourself from, like, I'm already like hearing people listening to this podcast, like, um, how do you believe in evil spirits? Do you believe in like evil entities?
Um, it's such a complicated question. I do feel like there are trickster spirits and there are darker spirits. Whether I would call them evil or not, I don't know. However, I'm fortunate enough to have been protected from any firsthand experiences. I also get warnings. So if somebody I remember this woman wanting me to read somebody for her. And the night before the reading, I already felt uneasy when she booked. I knew nothing about anything. The night before the reading, I had a dream. And the dream specifically said, like, if you read this person, this is going to happen. This is not someone for you to read. And I had to send her to a different kind of medium because this soul was at unrest. And I do feel like when souls are at unrest or don't know why they died or where they are, they can wreak some havoc. And funny enough, that what I experienced in my dream ended up happening with this other woman, but this other woman was a very different type of medium who was able to handle these things. I was still very early in my career. And so I knew that it wasn't a good idea for me to take on this, you know, this client. Um, but I do believe, like, if you believe in good, you got to believe that there's some negative out there too. And I think protecting myself has been a journey. There's lots of prayer involved. I call in lots of people before reading. If you've ever done a reading with me, I first do a prayer. And then if your prayer is not your thing, then we just call in the energies, right? We call in the sun and the moon and the stars and the earth. Because if you don't believe in the higher power, that's fine. But you're going to believe in what's there, right? So you'll believe in the energies and the properties of the planet that we live on. So I call them in for protection too. And I think it's always given me a really beautiful experience while reading. And thank God I haven't had a negative experience. And I don't anticipate I will, but I know that, I know they exist.
Yeah. Yeah. And like listening to your intuition, right? So you listened to that dream,
Oh, absolutely.
right? So for those listening, like how else would you recommend following that intuition? Like being able to open up those intuitive abilities. You believe everyone's intuitive on the planet.
I do believe that everybody has the capacity for intuition. I think that it just manifests in us differently. One thing that I tell my client, because the questions that I'm asked so often is how can you tell intuition from anxiety? Right.
Mm,
And I feel like intuition is a quiet knock, right? And it doesn't cause anxiety, but it's this feeling of somebody knocking on the door and you knowing exactly who it is. And anxiety feels like a salesperson who's constantly knocking at the door, knocking at the door, knocking at the door, knocking at the door. And you're like, I don't want any part of this. Go away. I'm trying to feed my family right now. We're at dinner. And they're just knocking at the door, knocking at the, it's like a different kind of persistency. So when I had the dream, it didn't throw me into like a spiral. What it was like, yeah, I need to cancel that reading. And it felt a very like, and I didn't question it after. And sure, there was some anxiety afterwards because I was like, did I do the right thing?
mhm.
That I have just read her? Am I, am I able to do this? But the intuition for me is just like a quiet knowing. And I believe everybody has it to some capacity. Whether or not you listen to the quiet knowing, when you start to like listen, then I feel like your intuition expands. But I do feel like everybody has intuition. Everybody has a gut feeling, whether or not we've connected with it or we believe it or we nurture it. It
Yeah.
depends.
And I've done readings with you. Hope is amazing. So when she's back on in January, you guys got to book with her.
So schedule at some point in the next few. for January because I know those what is the year gonna bring readings are coming.
Wild. We're filming, we're recording in September. It's like wild. Yeah, when did you realize like, okay, I have this gift and I desire to like create a business from it? Like, where did you receive that confirmation and that like inner knowing, like, oh, I can help people this way?
It happened by accident. And I'm sure it wasn't an actual accident, but I was hosting during COVID Reiki circles, and just doing meditations because I needed a time and place to do it. And I wanted to offer it to people who I knew. And little by little, that grew. And so within that community, I started saying, like, let me tap on everybody's energy. And I would literally be in a Zoom room and tap on everybody's little picture. And all of a sudden, I was getting downloads without the cards. And I was like, hey, is this going on in your life? This is what I think you should do about it. You know what? That throat thing you have going on, I think you need to check it out. And I was getting, there would be 16 people in the room, and I'd get 16 different messages. And then little by little, that shifted to where there were 16 different messages, but then crossed over loved ones would show up into the room. And I am a very, like, I live life so intuitively. So I was very much like, okay, if this happens, let's lean into it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? That I tell somebody to check something out and nothing comes of it? That's fine. And all the information that I get is always usually really, really beautiful, really nurturing, really loving, and used for healing purposes. So I don't get any like scary or jarring information. And if it is scary or jarring, it comes in a very like, hey, you should check this out package. Maybe there's something that you need to do to change your health, or to improve your health, things like that. So little by little, I just kept seeing more crossover relatives coming. And so I would speak to them and then speak to my clients. And I think after a few months of that, I was like, yeah, let's take the show on the road. Let's like offer this. And then I started offering readings and medium sessions. And it's been kind of going the last 3.5 years ever since.
Amazing. So just like opening yourself up, tapping in, and then trusting, right? Like receiving that feedback from a client of like, oh yeah, that's right, or that's true. So you're more clairvoyant.
I think I'm all of them. It depends who's coming through. Like, um, when it comes to the mediumship, I do see people. But when it comes to just like if I'm doing a reading, I won't see things, I'll just know things. And sometimes it feels like somebody's channeling through me, or like I'm speaking, but I don't know where the information's coming from, more like a clairsentience. And there's other times where I do hear things. So there's times where like even I'll chat with her. I mean, you know this, right? Because we're on the phone. But I'll chat with you and you'll say da da da, and I'm like, I'm hearing da 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 da. So I think I'm a bit of all of them depending on what I'm doing. I feel like the mediumship and just the psychic power that I have, it's almost like it's two lanes on the same highway
Hmm.
where like we're going in the same direction. It's the same, it's the same kind of energy. We're going the same speed, but it's just a switch from left to right. It feels a little bit different.
Interesting. Yeah. And for those of you who might not have know the clairs, right? So there are a lot more than five,
Yeah.
right? Like you said before, the smell, I get that too, like smelling someone's perfume or cologne or a bad smell. Like sometimes I will get that and I know like, oh, that's
Oh,
a
yes.
spirit that's not supposed to be here.
Yeah. I experienced that recently at a family member's home. I remember telling
Mm.
you where I was just like, it smells horrible in here. And I was the only one smelling it. And I was like, yeah, they have not done their due diligence to clean out this space energetically. So
Mhm.
I left, took the kids, and afterwards was like, hey, I think you should like mop with Florida water. There's some like stink energy in your house that only I can smell.
Yeah, no, I remember the first time that happened to me was my grandpa's cologne, and I have not even met him in this lifetime. And I was just like walking in San Francisco, and I was like, "Grandpa?" Like it was just like click, it just like clicked. It was like, "Oh, that's him," and
My grandma
that's
too. She sends gardenias. Sorry, I cut you off.
Mm. No, it's okay. That's I forgot what the smell one is, but the knowing is that what you said, the clairsentience, right? You just know. Oh no, claircognizance. Clairsentience is feeling. So claircog if you guys are listening, right, and like you desire to tap into your intuition, there's so many, like Hope said, so many different avenues, right? It's like if you have this deep knowing, and a lot of us do, we're all many of us are old souls, and from a young age we just knew things, right? If you had people in your life when you were 5, 6, 7, be like, how do you know that? That's not true. And you're just like, no, I know, right? That's claircognizance. It's just this deep knowing that you been here for lifetimes, that you are this ancient soul. And then clairsentience is that feeling, right? Could you give an example of like that clairsentience of just like that deep knowing? I mean, deep feeling, like kind of what you said, like moving into a room and just feeling something off.
Um, Usually for me, it comes in my body, like it comes to me in the form of like some kind of body reaction. So I will just literally feel it in my physical body when something's off. I remember like being younger and being like a little kid and meeting people. And I remember then it was like, go give so and so a hug.
Ugh,
And
I have
just,
like chills
like,
thinking about that.
yeah. So my body would just like internally kind of like constrict. And I would know, like, yeah, no, we're not giving this person a hug. And thankfully I had parents at the time who like didn't push it when I was off. And I think they, to some degree, probably I reinforced what they were feeling about these people too. But that's how it appears to me. It's just feeling of like, no. And it's very, very much tied. And I'm getting this feeling more and more because I think I dealt with as a child trauma and dissociation. So I wasn't very connected to my physical body. And so this past year, that's where it's coming up for me so much more, where I am so much more connected to my physical body, where I do feel it in my physical body. When I'm doing readings, if somebody asks me something, usually it's always about like a lover, right? And somebody's like, what do you think about this person? I'm just like, like, no, right? But I'll feel it in a certain body part. Like I'll feel it in my chest, or sometimes I'll feel it like, especially if they're talking about someone who's gonna harm them or like
Mm.
cause them a lot of like trauma. I feel it in my uterus, which is like the craziest thing, where I'll start to feel it in my hips, in my sacrum. And I'm like, listen, you can continue on this, but one is you're probably going to get pregnant. And two is this might be a karmic baby. Like, just be mindful of the choices you make. They're always choices. I think that's another thing people don't realize about readings is that I can tell you what's going to happen, but there's always several different options, right? Your future is not one lane, it's forks in the
Mm.
road constantly. And depending on what you choose, the universe molds itself around you. So when I do readings, I'm not like, this is what's going to happen right away. There are things that are set in stone, trust me. But there are certain things that if you choose this, you'll get this. If you choose this, you'll get this. There's always choices. But again, there are like a few things that I'm like, this is set in stone, this is the time and date, this is going to happen. But we use our free will a lot of times too. So depending on what you choose, the universe kind of opens up paths or course corrects. That's the most beautiful thing that I've seen. Where it's like, oh, you told me this was going to happen then, and then I did this instead, and then a year later I'm back on track. It's like, yeah, the universe will always like mold to support you.
That's a good, I want to say tip, but a good reflection, right? Because we forget we have this free will. That's literally why we came to Earth, to have free will and to have choices. And I see it as like, remember those choose your own adventure books as a kid?
And they have them now on Netflix.
They do.
Oh yes, my kids love it.
So it's like, yeah, there are always different timelines, right? Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
can choose, and that also gives you that energy too of like, oh, take everything with a grain of salt. Like I'm sharing this with you, but like this is up to you. Like don't take everything I say as stone. Like
Right.
yeah, if it resonates, but I feel like ever since I was little too, it's like people are drawn to mediums, like people are drawn to psychics, like tell me what to do, tell me how I should live my life, right? And what can you say to people that are, I don't want to say grasping for that energy, but you know the type of people I'm thinking about, right? That are looking for that direction and purpose.
Those are not the people who should come to me, because my readings never like that. Like, my readings tend to be focused on the healing work you should do to get what you want out of life. And so I can tell you what's going to happen, but I can also tell you, if you heal what's ailing you, if you heal the anxiety, those those thoughts that you can't make go away, if you heal the anger issues, the frustration, then you can get exactly what you want as you want it, and probably better. But usually when you come to me, there is this healing aspect. And I don't know whether or not it's because I'm a therapist or this is just who I am, but there always is a, hey, you need to focus on X, Y, and Z, and you can get exactly what you want. Or like, hey, if you want to know what's going to happen, these are the steps that you need to do to build your own intuition. I, not to toot my own horn, but like, I
Toot your
generally can tell
horn.
you, right? Like, I can tell you what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen. Whether or not you want to hear it is a big factor. Like, I just read someone who had a really difficult time swallowing what I had to hear and was very against what I had to hear. So that's a big thing, right? Are you ready to hear what the universe
Mm,
tell you? Are you ready, the good and the bad? Because things will come up that you may not want to hear. Like, I remember when I was going through, before I even started separating from my husband, like, I remember people saying like, oh, well, this, this wasn't meant to last. And I was in the thick of it. I didn't want to hear that. So of course I was like, you guys are crazy. This is not happening. I don't know what you're talking about. So that's one thing. Like, are you open to receiving things that you may not want to hear? And also, like, are you empowered with it? I start with prayer
mm.
and I start with grounding energy right before a reading, because I want you guys to feel empowered too. Yes, I'm the one giving you the information, but you're the person who it has to resonate with. And so if you're looking for someone who's just going to kind of tell you things and not lead you through that path of self-discovery, then I'm not your medium. Like, I am someone who's very big with, and that's just how it gets channeled through. Hey, if you work on this, and if you do this, and if you call back your power here, I bet you by next year you'll get exactly what you want. And I think you and I have these conversations back and forth with each other of like, hey, I really want this, or I want to grow the business, or I want to scale this. And we're like, okay, this is what's standing in your way. And you give it to me and I give it to you. And we have this beautiful relationship. We're like, okay. And then by the next week, we're like, yes, we did it. What's next? Like, bring it on. So if you're ready and willing to do the work, I'm absolutely it for you. But it takes healing to get what you want out of life.
Yeah, I love that. It's the practicality. You bring that, hey, these are the steps. I remember the first time you read me, oh my gosh, it was like, I think it was like one of your lives, your spirit DJs. Those were so much fun. And you were like, you need to drink filtered water. Like, you were like, they're just coming in and telling me you have to drink filtered water to open up your channel again. So yeah, I love that you bring, and also you're just so real, right? It's that East Coast in you. You're just so
Such a
authentic.
boss girl.
Yeah, we have no filter. It's like that I don't want to say tough love, but kind of, right? Like we get what we need. We don't get what we want out of readings and out of life, right? There are things that we want, and our soul has a whole nother plan. Our higher self has a whole nother plan, right? And it's the human, it's the ego of like, not that the ego is wrong. We need our ego, but our ego can get stuck, right? Like you just said, like separating from your husband. It's like, no, no, no. The human wants to hold on to the comfort and to what we know or what we think we know.
Oh yeah. It's funny, one of my clients the other day, and she's like, you read me like an older sister. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, I feel like you love me. She's like, but I also feel like you're telling me all the things I know, but I don't want to know. I'm like, yeah, that's honestly the vibe. Like your older sister telling you like the things that she wants. Like, I really do, when I connect with my clients, like, I really love them. And this is probably why I need 4 months of a break. But like, I really love each and every person that I come into contact with. And when I'm doing the readings, like, I really am super present and super there and super available. And I want to give you everything you ask for. and I do it very quickly. Like I channel very, very quickly. So I don't always have time to give you like platitudes and like I don't, I really don't, because the information comes flooding in. And the way the information comes flooding in is the way that I deliver it. So I never deliver it harshly. That's not who I am. And that's not the way that the channel works. But the channel will be like, hey, is this man for me? And like, oh, girl, no. Like, and it's not like, well, no,
Like,
it's just like, no, babe, he's not for you. But I'm going to tell you what's coming through. Like, this is what he looks like. This is where he's going to be. You're going to find him here. Don't worry, he's coming. But like, no, this is not going to stay for a long time. It's fine. It's good for now, but it's just a for now thing. And then I think that's where the like big sister energy comes through. It's like, I'm not going to lie to you and make it, you didn't pay me for that. You wanted to know the truth. And so I'm going to give it to you as best as I can.
I love it. I love it. It is. I feel that energy. Yeah, it's like that tough love, like, yeah, you're real. You're real. And I think that's what's important, is to have someone who's so in tune to the spirit world and to the client, right? And building that rapport and building that relationship. And what you said before, right? I'm sure your therapy, your training, all of that, how has that helped you bridge that energy between both of them? Even I'm sure your therapy clients, right? You naturally just bring in your psychic abilities.
Yeah, at this point, they're so intertwined that I have it like on my website and on my profiles and things like that. Like I let people know ahead of time, like I'm a psychic medium, I am a Reiki master. I use all of this all the time because I can't turn it off. I find that in the therapeutic experience, if you come and see me for one to one, I think it's beautiful to bridge the psychological and the supernatural. It really helps clients get a better understanding of themselves and of their past and of their lineage. And I think that when I was doing just one or the other, it always felt like a part of me was missing and that I wasn't
Mm.
integrating the two abilities. And I feel like, everybody has a talent, everybody has something that they can do. And I almost felt like I was doing a disservice to my clients, not bridging both of my talents, both of my gifts. And now I see so much progress with my clients. And they're so much more open. I mean, I definitely get a certain type of client. Like I'm not going to get a client who doesn't believe. Um, but they're so much more open, and then they're open to their own talents, to their own gifts. And it's been
Mm.
really incredible since I started bridging this. I started working with children because children energetically are incredible. And so open to all of this, and they'll tell you what they feel and what they sense and what they see. Um, and it's been going on now for about 7, 8 years where I've been bridging the two, and I love it. I love it, and I feel like I'm getting such good results with clients really working through what they're working through.
Yeah, I love that. You can't turn it off.
I know.
I can't either. At this point, it's like,
And
I,
I don't want to.
mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I don't feel bogged down by it. I think when you put the appropriate boundaries, it really feels like a gift.
Mm-hmm. And we're always learning, guys, if you're listening. Hope Hope and I are always talking about boundaries, and yeah, but the not being able to turn it off and then finding your people, right? Like the conversations we have. I mean, Hope was sharing with me like, "Michelle, I'm doing readings at the cemetery today." And I'm like, "Of course you are. Like, why wouldn't you?"
I love cemetery. It's such a weird thing to say out loud, but like my grandmother passed when I was 6 months old. So from that's my dad's mom. So from that moment on, my dad has always taken me to the cemetery. And I remember to give my mom a break, he would even take me to rides to the cemetery when I was like 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. And my dad would go every Sunday, every single Sunday from like by the time that I was 6 months old to like when he passed when I was 24. Every Sunday or every other Sunday, he would go to the cemetery and I would go with him. Like I learned to drive going to the cemetery because it was an easy road and it was in upstate New York, not upstate New York, but it was in Westchester. So I would drive. And that's where I learned to drive. He would take me out driving. Where are we going to go? We're going to go visit. Yeah, we're going to go visit my grandmother. And so like I've always found so much peace there. And although it was a sad place, and of course he had feelings and I would see him cry, like I always felt so comfortable going because that's all I knew. And so my dad passes and I would go every week, right? Making sure that every week, every Sunday, going there, visiting him, dropping flowers. And then after my kids came, bringing them to the cemetery, and they love going. And it's funny because again, my daughter's the one who's definitely has the mediumship. My son has different talents, but she's one we should bring flowers and put them on all on everybody's headstone. So
Oh,
that's something that she wants to do is like get a big bouquet of flowers and just leave one. And she goes, not everybody gets visited here, which I was like, you're the sweetest. Like I didn't even know that you were so perceptive. Um, but yeah, I'll sit with my dad. I have a blanket in my car and I'll sit and I'll do readings there and I'll channel energies. And it's funny because you would think that there'd be like thousands of spirits there. And I'm sure they are, but like I'm there for my dad. This is mine and his time. Right. So it's like going to Starbucks. Starbucks is full, but you're chatting to the person who you went to Starbucks with. You're not chatting with everybody else in the room. So
mm.
I've really learned to do boundaries and doing readings there. Like, wow, what peaceful energy. And I love that place. I mean, this is it feels very homey to me.
I'm not surprised. Ah, I love it. I love it. So beautiful. Something coming through is how can people listening tap into their past loved ones themselves or like, yeah, their open their channels in that way. And I guess, yeah, for guidance or protection, like what kind of advice would you give people?
I think that like the easiest way and the simplest way is a little altar. Like I think that they're always hanging around just wanting us to recognize them. And I think if you're having trouble connecting, a little picture, and if you don't have a picture, something that symbolizes them or their energy, and a little white candle in a corner of your house. I like to sometimes offer food and water, wine, whatever that person liked. But if you want to keep it bare minimum, a white votive, a picture, or something that symbolizes them, and talk to them and let them know that you are open to receiving what they have. I think that they just want, and you can do it without the altar. I just feel like as humans, sometimes we need a thing,
Hmm.
right? You can ask them and talk to them out in the air. You know what, grandma, I miss you. I really want to feel your presence. Could you send me a sign? Sometimes I'll ask for specific signs. I remember I asked my dad, I thought I was being so slick and I'm like, how are you going to do this? So I'm like, dad, if you can do this, I want 6 apples, red apples at my door, right? This happened like 3 months ago. And I'm like, if you can hear me, I want 6 red apples at my door. A week goes by. I'm like, ha ha ha, no red apples. My partner goes, didn't we get red apples when you ordered the Granny Smith and they didn't have any on your Instacart? And I was just like, okay, yeah, yeah, you're right. Thanks, dad. So I think like it's you have to just ask and talk to them. But I think as humans, we need like a point, a focal point, and the altar serves as this beautiful focal point to connect with, to talk to come and talk to the picture. And I love watching the flame, right? I love like sometimes I'll
Mm.
talk to the flame and the flame will start jumping. I'll say, hey, you guys here, jumping, but always do so with protection and really what do you want out of it? Protection and intention are your best friends when doing this kind of work and when trying to deepen your relationship to people who have crossed over. You want to ask first and foremost your higher power, whoever you believe in, whatever you believe in, for protection. And you really want to be clear about the intention. I don't think this is something to be taken lightly. Um, like I see things like the Ouija board and I fucking cringe. Um, when you are calling in spirit or spirits, you want to be mindful. Like they're resting, they're chilling, they're doing their jobs up in heaven or wherever they are. Like they have lives too. And so you don't want to do this in a way that it isn't intentional. You don't want to do this in a way that's kind of callous. You want to really, what is your intention? Why are you calling them in? You got to think of it as like, would you want to wake somebody up that's sleeping? If you would, because you want to talk to them or you want to enjoy them and you want a connection with them, like that's probably an okay reason to wake somebody up from a nap. But if you wouldn't wake somebody up from a nap, then don't knock on this person's door. Like, don't
Mhm.
invite them in without an intention. Hey, I need your help. I need protection. I really want to develop my intuition. How do I do that? Show me the sign. Show me a cardinal. Show me a butterfly. Show me a flower. Bring 6 apples to my door. Like, whatever it is.
Beautiful. Yeah. No, protection is definitely because you don't also want to call in, spirits that you're not connected to. Like
Oh, that's with any
there
of
are
those.
lots of energies all around us, that we can't necessarily see with our eyes, our physical eyes, but they're all around. So yeah, I feel like that's such a great piece of advice, protection and intention.
Oh, for sure. And that's why, like, there's so many spiritual tools available to us. But even as a medium, like, I wouldn't touch a Ouija board, and I don't play with pendulums anymore because I feel like there's many people who use pendulums and they're very accurate and it's very good for them. I feel like for me, the pendulums weren't accurate because the intention there was, let me ask who's around for the energy. It wasn't coming from my direct connection to a specific spirit or a specific channel.
Mm,
Um, and I feel like with other tools, like, you need to know the intention behind that tool. Who made the tool? Is it like, sometimes things are like encoded, encrypted, there's spell work combined, behind things. You have to trust your intuition and what you're doing and know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, then you need to trust your intuition with it, because there's certain things that, like, even as somebody who is super spiritual and who does this for a living, there's certain things that, like, I would not fuck with. Although when I was a kid, I was all about that magic 8 ball.
I did
All
the
about
Ouija board as a kid, and I remember like whenever I think of a Ouija board, I'm like, holy crap, we really called in because I was so witchy as a kid, but I didn't really know it. Yeah.
so funny. So one that I like, anytime I would pass it at Toys R Us, now we're like dating ourselves, but I would pass the aisle or I would pass it at Toys R Us, I would get this feeling of like, ugh, in me, that I was just like, nope, not for you. We're not doing that. But I would always buy every magic 8 ball there was, like the pink one. I had a pink sparkly one. It was so, honestly, I'm gonna order one off Amazon
I
today.
mean, they're fun. Those are fun. Ouija board, not a good idea. No, not a
No,
good
but
idea.
you have to know what you're doing, right? And know who you're around and what you're calling in. And I think that's, sometimes things are not so black and white, but
Oh,
protection and attention go such a long way.
yeah. I mean, we could talk about this for hours. So you're not doing readings till January. So those of you listening, but how else can people work with you and where can people find you?
Sure. So I can be found at Hope and Healing NYC on Instagram. I am on Threads occasionally sharing things that I think are hysterical, but I don't know if it does. Um, my website is hopeandhealingnyc.com. I'm not doing any readings until January, but I do have several programs open and I'm available for one-to-one coaching. So I have Glow. Glow is my weekly card reading. You get one card through Instagram, IG stories. And it's just a little bit of sprinkling. And so that's the idea, is to hold you guys over until I come back in January. Like, it's a little sprinkling of mediumship and psychic intuition. And then I have several programs that are coming up. I have Daughters of Demeter, which is my healing program for the mother wound that has been running and has been so incredible. And I think that is it. And then if you're in NYC or the tri-state area, then you can work with me one-to-one through insurance, which is incredible. All of that can be found on my website.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on. We do this literally multiple times a day, but I was
I
like, Hope,
know.
you got to be on the podcast and talk
Uh,
about
so fun.
mediumship. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on,
Thank you for
sharing your
having
gifts.
me. Oh, thanks, babe. I'm like, this was so good. It's so easy. You're so good.
Thanks.